Hello again. Guess what I discovered? I discovered that on the other side of the black hole, if I change my plus to minus and my minus to plus, zoop, I come back. And so, as I promised, I have returned to read the next part of chapter 1 called No More Birthdays. Now, unfortunately, I have a little problem with the fluffy animals. They are getting a little bit cheeky, or as we say in German, ein bisschen frech. But he seems to be a nice one, this, and he keeps looking over my shoulder. But I got a few more. Where is he? There is he, over there. And he's a shy one. But let's see. I must continue. You remember I got down to the bit that said, we all know what happened was real, awesome, and out of this space. Okay, let's continue. It all started on my very first day, in my very first lesson in a very big school. I must have been about 11. I remember it was Monday morning, period 1, maths, and someone called Mr. Bignell was to be my new maths teacher. We sat there in room 70, twiddling our newly sharpened pencils, listening to the grown-up voices coming from somewhere outside in the corridor, all a bit scared, all wondering what this Mr. Bignell would be like. The voices stopped, and in walked this little grey man, wearing glasses the size of jam jars. I swear they made his eyes look as big as snooker balls. And this was the good news. When he spoke, his voice was so dull, flat, and colorless. It was like he had released sleeping gas into the classroom, and we all began dozing off in seconds. He started giving out some sheets with rows and rows of sums, hard additions, suffocating subtractions, mean multiplications, and deadly divisions, 300 of them on one A4 side, and 300 on the back. And then, if that wasn't enough, he said we had 40 minutes to finish them. "Sir, is this a test?" the girl called out. Replied Mr. Bignell. Let me look at the departmental handbook." He started shuffling bits of paper, and then he disappeared into what looked like a cupboard behind his desk. We looked at each other, and you could see the same dread and unbelief in everyone's face. Someone loudly whispered, "I don't want to do all these." Someone else whispered, "This guy's gonna be so boring, my legs'll drop off." A piece of paper flew across the room and hit one of the girls called Melissa. I knew her from primary school. Mr. Boring Bignell came out of his cupboard holding an A4 booklet at arm's length and squinting like a jellyfish. The initial progressive in it targets to be. Then he did something really odd. Well, can you sit up, please? Stop. Okay. Then he did something really very odd. Something very unteacher-like. Something that should have told us that this Mr. Bignell was not at all what he seemed. He just dropped the A4 booklet on the floor in front of him, stood on it, and said, "Yes, let's call it a test. So no talking, no copying, and no calculators. Open your exercise books. Write the title Test and today's date, which is on the board. Underline it and get on with it." Oh boy. 600 sums. They ran all down the page, on both halves and on both sides, in such tiny print that only a mouse with a telescope could read them. Mr. Boring Bignell sat down at the front and watched us, and I swear there was something of a smile on his face. But every time I looked up, he seemed to be drilling us with these billiard ball eyes, so we had to at least pretend we were working. I got up to question number 178 when the bell rang. A huge sigh of relief swept through the room, and as soon as we could, we got out of there like our heads were on fire. I've told you about this first lesson because by the time our second maths lesson came around on Wednesday, period 3, we were all dreading it like it was going to be the end of the world. All we could see before us were those columns and columns of sums which we were sure Mr. Bignell would hand back to us to finish. But before Mr. Bignell arrived, one of the boys, called Paul, ran out to the whiteboard, found a board marker, and wrote in big letters, "Maths is boring. Mr. B is But he didn't finish, because we had some teachers out in the corridor, and Paul's bum only just hit his seat before Mr. Bignell came into the classroom. And he was carrying a dreaded thick bundle of papers. Without a word, he went to his seat, put down the papers, and turned his head slowly to the whiteboard. His jam-jar glasses scanned backwards and forwards, slowly this way and then slowly the other. He then turned to the class, sat down, and in complete silence just looked at us. And of course, we sat there with zips across our mouths, eyes wide, hearts banging, biting our cheeks, just waiting for the explosion. And we waited and waited. Oh man, it was so unbearable. I thought I was going to wet myself. I glanced at this girl called Josie, who had begun squirming in her seat, and I wondered if she was going to point the finger at Paul and drop him in it. But Paul just looked so innocent and so cool, especially for someone about to be eaten alive. It was now, at this moment, that the next sign came. Suddenly, Mr. Bignell bared his teeth like a dog and growled loudly. Then he barked. I swear he barked like some mad dog. But worse was to come, because when he stopped barking, Mr. Bignell, our new maths teacher, turned his head up towards the ceiling and started howling and howling like a crazy wolf. A girl near the front started giggling, and some of the others began laughing and shaking their heads. The kid next to me said, "Man, this guy's lost it big time." Me, I just sat there, glad that something was going on, but I just wasn't ready, nor was anyone, for Mr. Bignell's next move, because it scared me and the whole class to death and beyond. "Not good enough, eh?" he shouted. "Well, how about this? Roar!" Deep from his throat came a roaring scream, so loud it shook the skin on my face and made me sweat with terrifying cold fear. Suddenly his hand shot out into the air, only it wasn't a hand, but a massive hairy paw with 5 lethal claws stretched out, ready to strike. Then I blinked, and he was gone. And that is the end of the second part of my story. I will be back with some wake up with some more of my friends to finish the third part. Okay, goodbye. And don't forget, if you want your own copy of my book, you can always get it there. Okay, bye bye. See you again soon with the next part.